Hello again, math students. Today we're going to continue our work with the Pythagorean theorem. And today, as you can see on the screen, we're going to be talking about something called the converse of the Pythagorean theorem. A converse can mean the opposite of, like it says on the screen, that's the main meaning. But when we're talking about this in terms of math, usually it means that we're changing the order of something. So usually for the Pythagorean theorem, we say, if you have a right triangle, then a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The Pythagorean theorem works. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem to prove that we have, or prove that we don't have, a right triangle. So if a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then we have a right triangle. The work that we're going to do is very much the same as what we have been doing. It's just that now, instead of knowing that we're starting with a right triangle, we're trying to see if we have a right triangle. So here again, we've got that if-then statement. Again, typically we say if it's a right triangle, then a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Here we're switching the if and the then. If a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then it's a right triangle. So what we're going to be doing is substituting in the three side lengths that they're giving us. So instead of trying to find a side length, we are going to be given all three side lengths. We're going to substitute them in and see if it works. The important thing, the really, really, really important thing is that you have to have the longest side, the biggest number, substituted in for the c, the hypotenuse. The c is always the biggest number. So if I give you these three side lengths, 7, 24, 25, and I want to know if this is a right triangle. Now, it's important that, again, I find the biggest number. This is your biggest number. That's going to be my c. So when I substitute these in, I'll say 7 squared plus 24 squared. Does it equal 25 squared? Can you see I've got that question mark about the equal sign? You don't have to write that every single time, but realize we don't know if it's equal or not. We're checking to see if it's equal. So 7 squared is 49, 24 squared is 576, and 25 squared is 625. When I add these two together, I do get 625. And since they're both the same answer, that means that it does make a right triangle because the Pythagorean theorem worked. If I give you a 5, 8, 12 triangle, again, the 12 has to be the c because that's the longest side or the biggest number. So I'd substitute in the a and the b and the c. 5 squared is 25, 64 for 8 squared, and 144 for 12 squared. When I add 25 plus 64, that's not going to be 144. That's only 89. So since that doesn't equal, you can see that they even did like the equal sign with the slash through it. That means it's not going to be a right triangle. So on these problems, I want to decide if these would make a right triangle or not. Having a calculator handy would be a good idea. Some of these you'll be able to do in your head, but maybe not all of them. And the first step in every one of them is, let's find the C. On the answer key for today's worksheet, I circled every one of them and I put a C next to it. I don't care if you put a C next to it. You have to be aware, though, of which one is going to be the C. Now, again, since we've already done a lot of work with memorizing perfect squares, some of this is going to go pretty fast. Here I would have 8 squared plus 10 squared. Does that equal 14 squared? Well, 8 squared is 64. 100 for 10 squared. 14 squared is 196. Before I even add these two together, this ends with a 6. 4 plus 0 is going to end with a 4. I know this isn't going to work. So this is no, that does not work. In number 2, I have to see that this is my biggest number. 1.3 is the longest side out of all those sides. So that has to be my C. I don't care for the 1.2 and the 0.5, which one is the A and which one's the B. If you want to keep the order that we've got there, that's fine. 1.2 plus 0.5, square both of them. Does that equal 1.3 squared? Well, 1.2 squared, I know that 12 squared is 144, so I'll have 2 decimal places, so 1.44 0.5 squared, 5 squared is 25, so 2 decimal places, that'll be 0.25. I want to know, does that equal 13 squared is 169, so 1.69 for 1.3 squared. When I add these together, I do get 1.69 on this side and 1.69 on this side. So this is, yes, that's a right triangle. For number 3, the longest side here is the 82. So we'll have 18 squared plus 80 squared. Does that equal 82 squared? All right, 18 squared is one that some people might have memorized and I don't have at the top of my head. So 324. 80 squared, we can do that one. That's going to be 8 times 8 is 64, and then 2 zeros. 82 squared. That is 6,724. When I add these two together, I'm going to get 6,724, and that equals 6,724. So this is yes, that is a right triangle. In number 4, the longest side is the 17. So I would have to do 15 squared plus 8 squared. Does that equal 17 squared? 15 squared, that's 225. 8 squared, that's 64. 17 squared, let me just double check that one, that's 289. And when I add these two together, I do get 289. So because they're the same, yep, we've got a right triangle. You're going to notice today, if you've been starting to recognize some of our Pythagorean triples, those are going to come up a lot in these problems that are giving us yeses. For number 5, the 9 is the biggest number. That's got to be the C. So I'll have 5 squared plus 6 squared. Does that equal 9 squared? 25 plus 36. Now, I could totally see some people skipping over writing the 81 right there. Add these two together. This is going to be, 61, which is clearly not equal to 81. So this is a no. And for the last one, here's our C. All right, so 2.4 squared plus 2.5 squared, does that equal 3.6 squared? 2.4 squared is 5.76. 2.5 squared, 25 squared is 625, so this would be 6.25. And when I add those two together, I'll get 12.01. And again, just recognizing numbers, 3.6 squared, I'll end with a 6 times 6 is going to end with a 6 in my answer. I know these are not going to be equal, right? We can still crunch those numbers. 3.6 squared, that gives me, hold on, 3.6 squared is 12.96. So, nope, that one doesn't work. We do like to put that equal sign with the slash through it when it's not going to work, just as a visual, like, nope, it is not equal. So today's worksheet is really just crunching a bunch of numbers for the Pythagorean theorem. The only real tricky part is you have to get the biggest number for the C. The answer keys in Schoology, when you're done with that, make sure that you take the learning check. Let me know if you need any help.